Hope you're doing great. This is Nadi from NA Global Server. And since we're gonna start the new GvG season soon, I wanted to make a video for my guildmates and anyone who would like to play Bard or Dancer. Now, in this video, I will make it as simple as possible, focusing mainly on the dive build for a GvG Bard or Dancer. And I will try to provide some budget options as well for new players to play the class efficiently. First, let's talk about your role in GvG. What should you do? Typically, a diver, bard or dancer have two jobs. First, you want to either dive a group of enemies and use your Doomsday, or you want to control a choke point, for example this one, with your Doomsday, like this. This is number one. Number two, you can support your allies by rezzing them and debuffing enemies. So let's talk about Doomsday. What is Doomsday? Doomsday is a T4 skill. When you use it, you'll make a 5-meter circle around you, which is the one I showed you earlier. The enemies inside this circle will die after 5 seconds, and the enemies outside the circle who try to damage you will do 100% less damage. Now, the 100% less damage applies to maybe 90% of the skills. There are some skills that bypass it, that basically does true damage to you. So for the most part, you are immune. And of course, enemies inside the circle can damage you for the full damage. Next, let's talk about the stats distribution. It is a traditional max vit for HP, max int for SP and SP regen. Throw the rest into dex to lower your cast time. Next up, let's move to skills. Again, this is a very simple build focused on the GvG Bard or Dancer. So I'm only gonna mention the active skills that I use, passive skills, and the active skills that I don't use in GvG I'm not gonna mention at all. This is a T1, you should take the same points I put in. T2, I want to talk about Apple of Eden. It's a solo skill which turns into a buff if you have the rune for it. What does this mean? It means that you do not have to keep playing the song to have the HP increase effect. So I would only recommend using Apple of Eden if you have the third line of its rune. We talked about Doomsday, which is a song that you play. But what if your Doomsday got cancelled or it's on cooldown? In that case, you have another song to use. This is the one I personally use. It's called Lullaby. What it does, it puts enemies around you to sleep with an 80% chance. I find that it's pretty good because there is no resist sleep enchant. So the only way the enemy can avoid getting slept is if they have remove buff or they're using a nightmare card. Other than that, it's very likely that they're gonna put to sleep. Other than that, on this page, there's no active skill worth mentioning. Just use the same points as I did. Next up, Puppeteer Trick. It's a nice active skill that can give you up to a 40% HP shield. I think this effect might be different for dancers, I'm not sure. But either way, this is not a skill that I always use, just because I have to target an ally to use it. And I don't always have the time to do that when I'm diving or fighting in GvG. Other than that, you should use the same points as I said. There are some good passive skills here. Finally, for T3 skills, this is the passive skill that you need to have this for SP and SP regen. Put at least 1 point into Raging Storm. You're gonna know why later. Song of Return is maybe your third most important skill, because this is the skill you use to res your teammates. Other than that, there is no other skill here I use in GvG. Let's move on to T4. Your most important skill, the End of Sun and Moon, or as we call it, Doomsday. Be careful that you're gonna need to use an origin book to get this skill to level 10. Otherwise, you're not gonna have the 100% damage reduction from enemies. Now, you can't play the songs alone. You need a partner to play it with you. Luckily, bards have a skill to give you an illusion puppet to play the songs with you. So you must use this skill before you can cast any song. This illusion puppet lasts for 60 seconds. It's on a 30 seconds cooldown. You have to keep refreshing the illusion puppet as you are playing the songs. If the illusion puppet runs out while you're playing your Doomsday, for example, your Doomsday will also get cancelled. Next up, Bragg's Faith. I use this to regain some HP for myself and my teammates around me. Note that you cannot use the skill while you're playing a song, so only use it when your Doomsday is down, for example, or if you want to regain HP urgently. Other than that, there is no active skill that I use here. Make sure to put in skills in your passive skills, like these two, they're very important. So, which skills do I use in my skill bar? I use Prepare for Elite with the Illusion Puppet to play the songs, and the Apple of Eden to give me extra HP. These two I will mention later. I use Illusion Puppet here. Why do I have it here even though I have it on my Prepare for Elite? Just to know when it's on cooldown or not. Just a reminder for myself. So for example, if I want my puppet, but I don't know if it's on cooldown or not, since Prepare for Elite doesn't show me, I can know from having the skill icon here. Again, this is a very simplified build targeted for GvG. I use my Doomsday here. I use a smoky card, so I have hiding. I will explain the purpose of it later. Play Dead. Play Dead, it works on either Woe or Walk, I can't remember which exactly, which is a quick 10% HP restore. Tarot Card of Fate, and I forgot to mention this earlier. Tarot card is a single targeted debuff. Use it on an enemy. You give them one of these debuffs randomly. It's one of the two skills I use in my auto bar along with Res, which is a Song of Return. This is for my first bar. For my second bar, I do not use it as often. Shining Sun and Moon, I rarely ever use this. It gives you and your teammates a reflect effect. It's not as good because almost every magic DPS in GvG have anti-reflect relic, so I do not use it anymore. Lullaby, I use this when my Doomsday is on cooldown. Raging Storm. In GvG, I just use this to get out of hiding. If I used hiding and I need to move quickly, I use Raging Storm to get out of hiding so I can move faster. Stay Calm, I use this to re-equip my equipment if I ever get stripped. Puppeteer's Trick, to get a shield, but you need to target an ally to use it, so I don't always use it. And finally, Bragg's Faith, to restore HP for myself and for my teammates around me. That's it for the skills. You don't have to worry too much about the other skills when you're in GvG. And as I said earlier, in my auto skill bar, I use the tarot card and the res. Now keep in mind, when you're using your auto skills, have stay alert on. So when you're using Doomsday, you do not accidentally step out of circle to tarot card an enemy or res an ally. Having stay alert on will not let you move. Now, let's talk about what can cancel your Doomsday. Number one, and it's something that shouldn't happen, is if your illusion puppet run out. If you keep renewing it whenever it's on cooldown, it will never happen to you. Number two, if you run out of SP, your Doomsday will run out as well. And if you die. Now, let's move on to number two. I feel like the first 3 points were actually really silly. If you walk out of your Doomsday intentionally or unintentionally, it will cancel your Doomsday. Now, unintentionally how? By getting feared, for example. If you get feared, you might walk all the way out of your Doomsday. So fear might be like one of the worst CCs to get. But there are few ways to avoid it. Number one, which is one way I do not exactly recommend, is having a really high fear resist in your enchants. Personally, I never did that. I used the Mentalist card, which avoids you getting feared altogether, until I pulled a Wanderer's card, which stops me from getting any CC for me and my teammates around me when I'm playing a song like Doomsday. And it's not CC exactly, it's abnormal status, so it also includes getting poisoned. I do not get any further poison stacks when I am playing a song while having this card on. Again, it's fine if you don't have it. You can use a Mentalist card. We just want to avoid getting feared. Next, what else can cancel your Doomsday? Getting your weapon stripped. It will immediately cancel your Doomsday. And finally, if you get Dark Matter trapped from a Hunter, Manhold from a PD, or Wormhold or Blackhold from a CM. Luckily, most of these are ground magic effects. So if you have an earth field, you will dodge the Dark Matter trap, the Black Hole, the Manhole, but not the Wormhole though. So I really recommend that you have a CM in your party to cast earth fields on you. Or if you find an earth field of another ally not in your party, or an enemy even, stand on the earth field in your Doomsday, so you can avoid these ground magic effects. Another way is to have this GvG tail, which makes you avoid the ground magic effects for a few seconds on a 5 seconds cooldown. So it is pretty decent. Now, as for the Wormhole of a CM, I like to keep moving around the edges of my Doomsday as I'm playing. So Wormhole is not as a targeted skill. I can dodge it if I'm lucky, or I can also use hide if I have the chance, which doesn't always work, but if I find an opportunity to hide, I usually hide around the corners. Now, this is why I do not upgrade my weapon to tier 5. A tier 5 southern loot will let your Doomsday move with you. So if I'm on the edge here, my Doomsday would actually be moving to the right until I am centered in it, which can give your position away. That's why I do not use a tier 5 skill, tier 5 weapon, sorry. Even though the restore effect is nice, but it's not worth getting my position revealed all the time. Now let's talk about equipment, and again I will try to provide some budget options for new players who would love to try the class. First, the weapon. Like I said, plus 10 is more than enough. You do not need plus 15. Plus 15 you only get 8 extra attributes and you get 5% HP. It's not very worth it. Like, I would keep this for later. Now I personally do not use the tier 5 effect on my weapon because, like I said, it gives your position away, makes you an easy target for wormholes. Some bards may disagree with me on this. Again, this is up to your personal playstyle and personal preference. And of course try to get tenacity on your weapon or CC resistance. As for the cards, I use 2 Spash, but you can definitely use 2 Meta Ant cards for the 5% HP each. Next, Eggshell Bio. I use this to protect my equipment from getting broken, which can happen often in a crowded GvG. If you do not have an Eggshell Bio, you can use any tank headgear, but you have to use a repair alloy at all times. Or you can even use the GvG headgear that gives you cooldown reduction. It's also pretty good. But again, you have to use repair to repair your equipment frequently. As for the cards, I use a Wanderer card. If you do not have it, you can use a Mentalist card to avoid getting feared. Next, for the face, I use an Eastern Dragon Visage, which gives a lot of skill damage reduction. If you do not have it, you can use a GvG one that gives you extra range on the skills. Specifically for your reses, you can res from a far distance, and for turret cards on the enemies. If you do not have either of them, you can use any face tanky headgear. Next up, I normally use the GvG headgears for the remaining slots. For the mouth, I use the bread with egg for more HP and SP. For the back, I use the elemental back for extra elemental reductions and extra healing received and healing to my allies. And for the tail, I use the skill damage tail for the mini earth field effect that you get with it. Now I understand that at the beginning of GvG, the first week, you're not gonna have any of these headgears, so go with your traditional tank tail, back and mouth. Personally, I use the fire reduction mouth. You can also use the Kraken, which is this one if you have it. Gives you some HP and some race reduction. For me, I use the cooldown reduction back and the skill damage tail. I try to get this one first. When you have extra or enough points to get it, I totally recommend getting this first, and then the back, and then the mouth. Now let's go to the left side. First, the offhand. I recommend the traditional elemental offhand. I have 2 that I use. One with the physical damage reduction, random attribute, the snake card, and the other one, which is the one that I recommend that you use, with the elemental reduction line. For GvG, I recommend that you use the elemental reduction line. For me, I use it with a Ludistar. Now, the best cards would be Snake or GTB. If you do not have them, you can use Ludistar like I do, or even a Basilisk card. Moving on to the armor, use the elemental armor. with the elemental reduction line. Now, I found a lot of success using Lowly Star because as a bard, you're gonna get hit a lot, and most of what you're gonna get hit with is not gonna hurt you because the enemy is usually outside your Doomsday. However, even the hits that don't hurt you will proc the Lowly Star effect, which is heal for each attack, 15% to cast heal on yourself. It's extra skill damage reduction, and when you're low on HP and you get hit with a skill attack, there's a chance you restore a flat 10% HP. This came in clutch for me a few times and saved me, so I use it with my board always. Another option, especially when the enemy has a bomber CM threat, is using a Ghost Ring card. Next, the garment. I use the damage reduction garment with a skill damage reduction random attribute. For the cards, I avoid using Deviling and I use Jack instead, since the depot effect of the Jack card can give you some health regen, and there is usually a lot of fire damage in GvG from Genos or AM or Slayer and so on. Next up, the boots. I use the damage reduction boots with the damage reduction random attribute line. I use an Edga card for that. Edga and Mooney are the best two cards for this shoe piece. If you do not have them, the next best card in my opinion is the Dark Lord Star. If you do not have Dark Lord, then you can use an HP percent card. Finally, the accessories. I use a HP random attribute accessory. The PvP line doesn't matter, so only the HP line matters here. And I use an Osiris card. Osiris is really nice, since when you die and you get rezzed, you will restore full your HP. In WoW, if you get rezzed automatically at a stronghold, you will be revived with full HP and SP as well. But this card is not a priority. On my other accessory, I use a Smoky card for hiding, and Smoky is also not a priority. What you can use for your card slot, you can use a Fisherman card. As for the shadow equipment, I use the Arcane Codex for some cooldown reduction. You can also use the Giant Armor Shield for elemental reductions. Both of them are pretty good. For the garment, I use a tank shadow equipment. For the shoe, I use the Green Rattan. I don't think there's anything better right now. That might change in the future when they come out with the shadow effects. For the Oracle Mirror, I use a Meteorite Armor. In the future, I'm gonna change that one and use the Synth of the Meteorite Armor as a shadow equipment. For the offensive Oracle Mirror slot, I use the Staff of Vitality for stronger healing from Ragged Faith. As for the relic, I use True Sight. It's not the best for bards. I think the best would be HP Block or the Spiritual Blade. But you can definitely play the class without any relic at all, so it is not a priority. Next, let's talk about the runes. Bard doesn't require a lot of runes, luckily. There are only two really important runes for Bard. Number one is the Doomsday rune. The first line, try to get it as high as you can. It lowers the cooldown of your Doomsday. Second line is not important at all, you can totally ignore it. Third line is nice to have. The second important rune is a rune. It makes that the people you res with your res skill are invincible for up to 3 seconds. So if you do not have this rune and you rest somebody, they might just die right away. But this rune actually gives them a chance to buff themselves up again, get in a better position. So I find it's really important in GvG. The other 3 runes, Forbidden Fruit, remember Apple of Eden, the buff that gives you extra HP. Now you need this rune, a 3rd line, to be able to use Apple of Eden. Otherwise, I would not recommend using Apple of Eden. We have a tarot card rune. It makes it so that you have a high chance to use 2 cards on an enemy at the same time instead of just 1. And finally, this one for Bragg's Faith. It makes the enemy takes more damage during Bragg's Faith when it ends, and your allies take less damage during Bragg's Faith when it ends. Again, it's not very necessary. The most 2 important runes are the Doomsday and the Res one. And this one if you want to use the Apple of Eden. Now, I didn't find any rune here to use. I would use the Shield Resonance in normal cases outside GvG. But for GvG, I would rather keep this slot open so I can use more defensive attribute runes. So for my defensive attribute runes, I use element auction ones. I use 2 skill damage reduction ones and HP. But you have to use some yellow and red attribute runes. So for the red ones, I use one with bonus healing, and this one is just random. For the yellow ones, I use int, vit, and size. Now, let's talk a little bit about your most important skill, Doomsday. If you noticed, Doomsday lasts for 60 seconds. However, the cooldown is 80 seconds. So there is 20 seconds of downtime. Luckily, we have some ways that we can reduce the cooldown of Doomsday. Number 1 is what we just talked about. The rune can reduce it up to 20%. Number 2, the Shadow Equipment, Arcane Codex. So that just both of them reduced your cooldown by 18 seconds. You can do another trick. In my bar here, I use my back, GvG back, and the offhand. But before I cast my Doomsday, I switch to cooldown back and Sense of the Living, which is also cooldown offhand. And what that does, it gives me a lower cooldown on my Doomsday. It was 18 seconds before, now it's 34 seconds less. And that's not everything. If you have a Saint in your party, a Suffragan will reduce it by even more. So your Doomsday would actually be around 30 to 35 seconds cooldown. So what do I do? Before I dive in, I switch to my offhand and back that reduce cooldown. I dive, use my Doomsday, and immediately switch back to my tanky offhand and GvG back. So that way I casted Doomsday on a lower cooldown, and now I have more resistances. Now let's talk about diving and GvG food. As a bard, like I said, many times you're gonna have to dive in the middle of the enemies to cast your Doomsday. And you want to try to survive for 5 seconds at least to kill the people around you. That would be a successful dive. To do that, first let's talk about the initial dive. Let's say that you're casting your Doomsday like this, and then you're running like this. Now this is really slow. They're gonna see you come in, you're gonna get CC'd, they're gonna stop you somehow. The good guilds at least. So to dive, you have two ways to do it efficiently. First, you can use hiding and then dash in, but you're very slowed. If you have Mooney, it's gonna be really fast. Another way to do it is to get speed and dive in. Now, how can we get speed? There are two ways. If you notice here, I have an accessory and I have another accessory here, the Martyr's Leech. I use this one so I can get the speed up ability, which gives you 100% movement speed for a few seconds. You can increase it if you upgrade the tier of this skill. I use a Horong on it to get a side skill as well, but it's not important. What's important is the speed up effect. Now, if I go to my prepare for elite, I have the sight, the Horong card, and the speed up effect. So now, I use my prepare for elite, I switch to my cooldown, back and offhand, and now I can dive way faster than before. Now this is definitely faster. This is the first way you can get speed, and of course I switch back to the tanky accessory after I have finished my dive. Another way you can get speed is by using the GvG food, the speed cake. It also gives you 100% movement speed for 10 seconds. And the cooldown is 1 minute, which is about the time of your Doomsday. So you can buff up. You can even go in hiding and then use the speed cake. They're not gonna see you coming unless they have sight or something with a similar effect. So even though you're in hiding and you should be slowed, you have a few seconds of decent movement speed. And this is the first GvG food I would like to talk about, the speed cake. We have other GvG food that is also really useful to use. This one, we use it for the HP restoration, restores 50% HP and SP. It's a good recovery way, especially that bards don't have a good enough recovery methods. Next, the summon syrup to summon your party. The purification syrup, which makes you immune to CC. It's good when you are diving, you want to cast it and walk in, so you don't get stopped by a stun or any kind of other CC that might stop you. And finally, this one, which I also use a lot, it decreases all physical and magical damage you take for 1 point, and it lasts for 5 seconds. And hey, 5 seconds is all you need to kill all the people around you. So if you dive in, I'm gonna do a demonstration. Switch to my cooldown, switch to my Martyr's Leech, use my prepare for elite. I lagged, but I dived in, use Doomsday, switch back, use the food to become immune, use this one to restore HP if I need it, and then also remember to always move around so you're not an easy target for wormholes. You don't want to move around the center too much, try to make it on the edges of your Doomsday. And if you're lucky enough, the dive will be successful and you'll get hundreds of kills by the end of GvG. One tip when you're diving, try to find a safe path to dive. So for example, if the enemy bard has a Doomsday, do not get inside his Doomsday to cast yours. You're gonna dive first before yours lasts for 5 seconds. So always try to find a good path to get as many enemies as possible, or if you're controlling a choke point, just cast it here and control the choke point. while remaining as far as possible. So if your guild is defending this amp, for example, cast your Doomsday here and stay as back as possible. So enemy wouldn't cancel your Doomsday if you're standing in the center. Of course, if you have the tier 5 weapon effect, the Doomsday will follow you, so you can't stay at the edges. And finally, before the GvG starts, don't forget to buff up, especially using Vit Food, oh not this one, Vit Meal B, Int and Index. As for the meal, I recommend going for the anti-death meal. Why? Because it can buy you 2 seconds to stay alive, and these 2 seconds might be what you need to get your Doomsday to kill the people around you. So I definitely recommend using the anti-death food. And with that, my video comes to an end. I hope that it was helpful to all of you. If I remember something extra that I forgot to mention, I will either type it in the comments or make a video if it's necessary. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me on the video or message me on Discord if you know my Discord. And I wish you all good luck and have fun playing the class. Peace.
When the silence is too loud, I swear I can hear a voice, left a message in the clouds. They are free to roam above the sea, and this story stays with me like a haunting melody. What do spirits say? What do spirits say in a darker day? What do spirits say? And this story stays with me like a haunting melody. What do spirits say? What do spirits say in a darker day? What do spirits say?